Well, hello again. Kat from Haverford. We are located, as I mentioned earlier, just outside the city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the sixth largest city in the United States, the first World Heritage City. Put in the chat what you think the second World Heritage City in the United States may be. Uh, we are on a really beautiful campus, just about 200 acres. My favorite stat, there's a 6-to-1 tree to student ratio. So you're surrounded by a lot of natural beauty, but you can also walk to two different train lines and be in the sixth largest city in the United States in just about 20 minutes. We're also close to many other colleges and universities and have a partnership with Bryn Mawr College, Swarthmore College, and the University of Pennsylvania. So you get all the benefits of being at a small liberal arts college with the 8-to-1 student to faculty ratio, an average class size of 14, but over 5,000 classes to choose from. And finally, I always like to talk about the value placed on student voice at Haverford. We're one of just a handful of institutions in the United States to guarantee undergraduate research. We know every student is capable of that, and so each and every student completes a senior thesis. We also have an entirely student-run honor code that's both social and academic in nature that allows for and really engenders a deeply caring and collaborative experience where you are treated as a colleague of everyone on campus. Our students are engaged in both shaping their own academic and social experiences, but also shaping the academic and social experiences of the college community. So students don't have proctored exams. Your final exams are self-scheduled. And what this really does is it mean that students aren't competing against one another, but are actually really looking to lift one another up. And we think those sort of liberal arts education, research-based education, and that education and ethical leadership allow our students to be really successful in all that's to come. So look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Right. Hello again, everybody. Darren Drebeck from Skidmore College. It's a diverse learning community of about 2,700 students located in Saratoga Springs, New York, like Colgate, in upstate New York, a beautiful, beautiful region here in the Northeast of the United States. We are a diverse learning community of students that really put creativity at the forefront of so much of what we do. The diversity of our majors and the breadth of our curriculum feel a little bit more like a university and offerings, and much larger than a student body of just 2,700 students. We offer both Bachelor of Arts degrees and Bachelor of Science degrees. The majority of our programs lead to Bachelor of Arts degrees in the liberal arts and sciences, but then we have some wonderful pre-professional programs, very popular majors such as management and business, an excellent major in education studies that will certify students to teach, and some real pre-professional opportunities for students if they want it, or just be surrounded by students studying a diverse array of academic interests that you may have. Saratoga Springs is a wonderful small city. It is home to America's oldest thoroughbred horse racing track, and this year will be home to the third leg of the Triple Crown, one of the most famous American horse races, the Belmont Stakes in Saratoga Springs in June. And we're at the foothills of the beautiful Adirondack Mountains, surrounded by natural beauty, about 3 hours north of New York City, 3 hours from Boston, and 3 hours from Montreal. So that's Skidmore College, and look forward to sharing more with you, but put your questions in the chat and we'll talk to you soon.
Amazing. Always so good to hear about your institutions in a new season, because I feel like there are new fun facts that I didn't get the last season. So really excited about it. So before we kind of dive into junior year, I know that several of you mentioned that you just came off of reading. You're in the middle of actually probably regular decision release. And so wanted to ask you all to just reflect for just a second on kind of what the cycle felt like for you. Just some observations about trends, maybe some interesting things that you saw in your reading process, maybe even something you learned about yourself in the reading process, challenges, things like that. Anything that you want to kind of share, just to give the audience a sense of like what it's like to do your job. So anyone can dive in first.
I was gonna maybe reflect on the cycle as a whole, and I'll just be honest, it felt great getting to know students again in person and traveling the world, us getting to travel to you and meet students around the world that we hadn't quite been able to in the last few classes, if to be honest. Some students who were able to visit us, that's wonderful as well. And we know not everybody can, and so even the virtual programs though have continued and persisted, and we're very excited about being able to do that. But that was I enjoyed that about this cycle and getting to know students very well. We did just release our decision, so many of those students we were able to meet in person over the last year, and that's exciting.
Awesome.
I'll jump in if you don't mind. One hot topic when we started reading was, of course, generative AI and ChatGPT. And what I learned is it's easy to detect. I was like, wait a minute, I think I read that exact Y. Davidson about 50 applications ago. Or when you put a part of it within an essay, right? Like, oh, this writing, and wait, the style of writing is changed. And then it goes back to this kind of writing. So, I was able to recognize that. So that was new. I think there was a lot of trepidation going into this reading season with this relatively new tool and kind of more widespread usage. So that was surprising. And I will say, even after hundreds and hundreds, thousands of applications at the end of February, I still found myself smiling and laughing reading essays. So that's when I thought, I'm in the right profession, even if I was really tired. Learning something about you is probably the greatest gift, learning something new. And that's why we always say, be your authentic self, because there isn't a better essay out there that totally lost my train of thought. That's what happens this time of year. But the best essay is the one where we find ourselves smiling and laughing and maybe crying and maybe really relating to you because we're getting to know you and you've allowed us to do that. So that's kind of, those are some of the thoughts I had this reading season.
I'll jump in. I echo both of those things. Every year, our jobs are very cyclical, and every year a reading season comes around, and I feel really excited to read applications and to learn about the students that we've met and to really dive into them a little bit more. And I do think this season felt a little bit longer in a sense, and maybe it was because the travel was back, and so we had just come off of a long travel season, and maybe my mindset was a little bit different. And then I got to, December, January, and I was still really excited to be reading these essays and to be hearing about students. I think one of the main themes that I saw this year is that we still don't miss, speak from our perspective, I still don't miss standardized testing. We are one of the schools that went test optional during the pandemic, and we're remaining test optional for a couple more years to gather more data. And every year, fewer and fewer students are submitting testing, and every year it matters less and less because you find other context clues in an application. It also sort of relieves a student of being tied to this arbitrary number that might not actually tell us the whole story about who you are, and allows for students to maybe express themselves in different ways and utilize different components of an application. So in lieu of having a test score, maybe they've decided to submit optional supplemental questions that give us a bit more about who they are as a person and how they would thrive on one of our campuses without being tied to this number that you might think fits in some random middle 50% that we've potentially calculated at some point. So that was one of my observations, is that, fewer of our students submitted testing, and that's great.
Yeah, that was one that I was really bubbling up for me, and I think really what I've heard from each of you, which I so appreciate and would just echo, is that this is a deeply human process, and that's why we love our jobs, because we have the opportunity to really think about who you are and what you value and what you seek in your next community, and how the places that we work for will allow you to continue to grow and be challenged and learn in new and exciting ways. And so, what I'm really proud of as thinking about the kind of challenges that higher education in America has currently, I think, the ability to step back and say, what are we doing well as institutions? What are we doing well as admission offices? And how can we be doing that better? And I feel really grateful to work with fantastic colleagues at Haverford, but also you all included as we think about how do we better serve students. And so just really wanting to lift up that idea of intentionality. That's something that we'll ask of you, but that's also something that we ask of ourselves. And we ask of our institutions, because we're educators and learning and growing in the ways that you are learning and growing as students too.
Wonderful. See, everyone, this is why I always invite these people to come to my talks, because they are very encouraging and empathetic. And I just really enjoy, like, I have a junior, like I said, and I also have a senior who just walked through the process. And a lot of times when we're walking through this process, we just go through the process and forget that there are real human beings on the other side. And so that is why we do these talks. I do want to kind of like go off of, given that a couple of you talked about not missing test scores, but that is usually what a lot of juniors are anxious about. So I wanted to start the junior conversation with, because I know even in my household, there's been this question of like, oh, what about the digital SAT? Like, do I need to do a test prep course? Things like that. So let's start with that. Given that many of the people in our audience do come from cultures and countries that are very metrics based, and very much about a test or a couple of tests, what would be kind of your advice on how to approach tests as a junior?
Happy to start on this one since I stood so hard on my little podium there for a moment. I think there's so many things that juniors preparing for this next phase of their life can be doing to better inform their college application process, not just the application process, but the entire search process. And while maybe you will find value in taking a course to prep for an SAT or an ACT and maybe taking that test once or twice, it shouldn't go much past that, because so much research has been done. And if you talk to any higher ed professionals, we're kind of nerdy about diving into data and understanding the way that the minds of students work, because generations continue to change as society continues to change. And what we found is that after your second, third, fourth test, nothing's changing in the way that you're taking the test. You're studying to take a certain kind of test, not for the actual knowledge of it. And so you might find that there's value, or you might find that there's pressure to take an SAT or an ACT once or twice, but there's so many other ways that you can channel your energy to serve you and your mental health better and your physical health better, whether that is pursuing an academic passion or getting a part-time job to understand customer service skills, or maybe it's having family responsibilities, helping an ailing grandfather, or just cleaning up around the house or working at your family's restaurant. Those are all highly valuable that will give you far better skills, some may argue, than studying for an exam. And the fact of the matter is that once you're on our campuses, especially the 4 of ours, you're going to be challenged to think in ways that the test does not make you think in. We challenge you to have conversations that might be uncomfortable with people who come from different backgrounds, and a test can't help you prepare for that kind of a thing.
I think the way that I always like to frame any part of this process is you're in control, right? So are you a good test taker? If you are, then sure, take a practice test, take the test once or twice. I think Mari's advice right there is great, and stop, right? Like, that is something that you're good at. So sure, why not? If you're not a good test taker, don't worry about it, right? Like, if that is not a skill set of yours, you don't need to invest your time and energy and effort into something that will not directly translate in many ways to the educational settings at many different colleges and universities across the United States. So I think that sort of framework of like, is this something I'm excited to do? Is this something that I think speaks to my strengths? How does this allow me to think about who I'll be when I get to college? To have those questions be at the heart of the decisions you're making will not only allow you to better understand yourself, it'll allow you to better understand what you seek in your next institution, and it'll allow you to have balance in your life, which is what we hope for you, right? So there's not a right or wrong answer in this scheme because it's about an individual making a choice that's best for them.
I'll add two thoughts here. One, strong test scores will not override poor grades. That's always been the case, even when we require testing, right? So you can't just take a test, do really well, and hope that it overrides those C's sophomore year or 10th grade. The second piece is what preparation for a test is actually going to help you in the future. Work on your English and not just memorizing words or memorizing ways to do better on the TOEFL or DET. Have conversations, listen to podcasts in English, continue to read English literature, develop your vocabulary that way, because stronger English skills will only benefit you on our campuses and in the future. So that would be the one that I would prepare for, and not just for the tests, but for conversations and daily living. So if you can push yourself to practice more English in a real way, having conversations and listening to English, that's going to benefit you in the long run.
And lastly, I'll maybe on top of what Mari had mentioned of channeling your energy towards other passions and other things that you do. I have a faculty friend who contends that a consistent part-time job is worth about 3 AP classes. He feels that students who have had that experience have taken a job that, you know, may not be glamorous, doesn't need to be glamorous, maybe especially one that will teach you time management, that will give you some responsibility. And those are some skills that you can bring to college with you and feel that they are extremely valuable. And so if you are looking at dividing up your time and that, you know, don't lose sight of that opportunity as something that may help you grow. And I think, you know, maybe going into the exams lastly is just being relaxed. Just kind of, especially if it's maybe your first one. I know maybe some students took their first one last weekend, weekend before. But then, you know, if you're going to take your first one in June, you know, go in as relaxed and you know, prepare best with a great night's sleep. Do what you do, and then, you know, then maybe go from there and look at it there. I too have a junior in our household, and that was kind of one way that I think she approached it, and we'll see, you know, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about academic measures then. If it's not just the tests and, you know, like tests can't override poor grades, let's talk about grades and what juniors can be thinking about in grades. And I want to couch this with some of the parents or counselors on the call might be trying to figure out good school lists to offer to their juniors. And sometimes they're looking at a certain kind of range. And it used to be they would just look at that range of SAT, right? So if tests are optional now, like how do we kind of envision, is this an academic fit school for me? Like, do I sit in that range of academics? So speak to that a little bit, and how, if you're not quite in that range too, what you can do to kind of get there. And how you should be approaching your second semester junior year.
Well, second semester junior year, and then you're maybe getting ready to select classes depending on your curriculum. Maybe it's static and you don't have choice in what you have for next year. But as you continue through your final year, grade 12, grade 13, what, you know, that last year is as important, more important than grade 11, grade 10. So the rigor in your curriculum, you still have opportunity to now say, yes, I am a hard worker. I am going to push myself. You know, not to sacrifice your mental well-being or sacrifice, you know, so much, but to challenge yourself and to don't let up on the gas so much. Continue with that maybe it's a fourth science, maybe it's a fourth level of a language, really going above and beyond, moving, trying to separate yourself maybe from classmates or peers that are thinking, well, my last year, I'm going to relax a little bit. So that senior year still has a lot in terms of rigor of curriculum, and strength in the curriculum, I think, is important to point out.
I'd say be realistic with yourself too. Are you a hard worker and do you enjoy it? Just because schools are selective because students work really hard, right? So it's not that you get to these schools and it's going to be easier than high school. It's often going to be harder than high school. So being realistic with yourself, and do you want 4 more years of really intense academics? Is that something that you're hopeful for? Also, be realistic with your writing abilities. Our 3 schools will have you writing a lot. Are you a strong writer? Is that something you need to work on? If you were to do a raw writing assignment and someone were to give you a topic and you couldn't use your computer, could you write a well-developed essay or response, maybe a couple paragraphs, without any tools, right? So really thinking about some of those reality checks, I would say. And you're going to be looking at students, as Darren said, depending on your curriculum. The curriculum might set you up for success at our high school or at our colleges and universities. Your curriculum might have some gaps in the sense that because of what's available at your high school, there might be those writing gaps. There might be that reading comprehension gap. So trying to figure out what some of those gaps might be. Some of it's getting in touch with maybe students from your home country or curriculum or school who might be at those places to find out how their transition went. But being realistic with your motivation, your own internal motivation when it comes to academics, what your grades say about your motivation and your work ethic, and then finding out what type of place, whether it's a very academic type institution or maybe, it's a different type of culture around academics.
Yeah, I think it's what is challenging, right, is that working at a selective and holistically driven for institutions that practice those types of admission practices, it's rarely predictable, right? Which I'm just going to say, I understand that is really frustrating. So I understand sort of at the root, Gloria's question is like, how do we best prepare for something that is actually inherently, because of its humanity, unpredictable? So a few things. One is that with most places that are test optional, about half of students are submitting testing, right? So those 50%, the mid 50% now of the SAT and ACT are probably higher than they were before that place was test optional. So you shouldn't see that mid 50%, and if you're 20 points lower than the mid 50%, say this isn't the place for me, right? That is not a good indication of whether or not this is a place that you will thrive. What I also think is really important to note, though, is that sort of, again, going back to the importance of self-reflection and what you seek and what you want in a community, recognizing that the strength of an academic program is not tied to a school's selectivity. So be comfortable with yourself and talk to your students, talk to your kids, talk to your peers, depending on who you are in this audience, and be comfortable with the fact that you need to apply to a wide range of schools based on selectivity. And know that if you are defining what's important for yourself and allowing yourself to sort of push against external rankings and valuing pieces of this process that make you happy and sing, that you'll be successful in many different places and that you'll get a great education across many different institutions, and that a selectivity rating is not telling you whether or not you'll get a good education there.
They covered it for the most part. I think that the only thing I would add back to your original point is, we publish middle 50%, we publish average GPAs. Those are averages of admitted student cohorts based on likely either unweighted GPAs, which is a very American kind of way of calculating a GPA, We all have our own scales that we convert things to, and those can kind of vary from place to place, which is sort of sad, unfortunately. But, you know, America has a decentralized education system, unlike a lot of other countries. And that requires that students have a lot of additional research to do. But I think, you know, at the core of it, talking to, like Kat and Kaylani said, like talking to people, exploring your additional like English proficiency options, also talking to current students. I know this is kind of deviating a little bit from your original
Right.
question, but it's such a good way to understand who belongs on our campuses and who thrives here. I was talking to a family yesterday who said, you know, we're visiting these 6 schools and you all look the same on paper. And then you come to campus and it's totally different.
Mm.
We recognize that not everybody has the opportunity to physically come to campus, but the opportunities that students have outside of that are talking to our current students and utilizing professors and utilizing staff members on our campus to say, hey, I know this is a weird question and maybe a little bit unique, but can you tell me a little bit about, you know, X, Y, and Z, and really get it from the student's perspective, because our jobs are to recruit you and to read your applications and to enroll you. And we can talk until we're blue in the face about all the facts and figures and stories that we know. But our students are the walking, breathing, talking version of what is on our campuses. And they are a true ambassador of what our students sort of go through on a day-to-day basis. Reach out to us and say, hey, I want to know what it's like for a student from my high school to be on your campus. Can you connect me with someone? And we're
Mhm.
likely going to be able to do that. We're going to reach out to that student and say, hey, one of your former classmates wants to talk to you. Would you be willing for me to give them your contact information? And while there might be a little bit of back and forth, we can give you that so that you can sort of see yourself going through that similar process.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite tips about talking to current students, because I think, you know, on the academic side, you can kind of see, do we jive like on academic topics? Are we able to like track with each other? That's a huge thing, but also socially and kind of what to expect is so much better from like a peer than an adult who's trying to tell you what might be good for you. So, even though that's what we're trying to do right now. I do want to just like sit on the academics just for one more question, because I know this comes up a lot, where students are worried that you just don't understand their curriculum because it's a national curriculum, or it's a very obscure, not common curriculum. And first, I'll just say I have talked to these people for many, many years, and they do a lot of research. And they do visit and they do talk to people. So they do try to learn about the resources that you have. But what ends up happening is a lot of students feel like they need to add to their transcripts by taking something that they think that makes more sense to you, whether that be an AP exam or, you know, something, you know, in the American curriculum. And so can you give advice on like how to approach self-studying APs, or how many APs should you take, or some other summer program classes that you should just boost your, you know, transcript with? Like, what is your opinion about that? When to do it and when not to do it, and things like that.
Oh, I'll jump in, because this reading season, oh, the number of students where their summers were summer classes and their extracurricular activities was independent research. What that translates to us is you're good at research and you're good at studying. How are you a community member? Who are you in your school community? How do you collaborate with others? Where's your creative kind of outlet? That's what we're looking for. And when we don't see that, it translates to us that you spend a lot of time on your own doing independent research, and that your sole focus is academics. We are places where, yes, we are academically driven, students are academically driven, but we're also places where we form community. So believe me when I say, for all of us, we have read thousands of applications around the world, times probably 10, depending on how many years you've been in the field, right? We cringe because we're at the end of it, but we become very familiar with curriculums around the world. And if we don't know, We reach out to counselors, we reach out to different community-based organizations, Education USA. As we were all starting in this field and kind of learning about the different curriculums around the world, that was our job, to understand the curriculum. Now, an AP exam is going to do the same thing as independent research or summer class. It shows us you're good at studying and that you can learn well, you can remember information, and you can do well on an exam. At some schools, it'll also give you college credit, and some students feel they want to get that college credit, but there's going to be a limit to that college credit. And so I would say focus on the curriculum that's offered at your high school. That's all we expect, and that's what we want to see. And then the second piece of that, equally as important when you're looking at schools like ours, is who are you as a community member? How do you enjoy spending your time? How do I get to know you as a human being? Doing independent research, while you may have a love for psychology or a love for a certain area, that doesn't help answer the question in my head of who is this person as a community member? I can see he was doing great work in the lab and with faculty, but that's just part of it. There's a whole other half, 50% of our evaluation or part of it is getting to know you as a human being. And so how you choose to spend your time, you need to think, how does that translate to us as AOs? And that's what we're trying to answer when we read your application.
I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making on an application is using this very limited real estate that you have to tell us about yourself to explain your curriculum. We receive, and I'm sure this is similar for my colleagues on this call, we receive applications from 160 different countries, which is hard to conceptualize for students, that there are also students applying from 159 other countries. And we have to interpret those transcripts because we read every single application that passes through our hands. So for you to take the time and that limited amount of space that you have on your application to tell us about something that we can look up is only a disservice to you. Tell us about the part-time job that you had. Tell us about the club that you started at your school. Tell us about the community service that you've done that's impacted your community. Tell us about the business that you started online or your Etsy shop or the arts that you've been pursuing, because those make you who you are, not the curriculum that you have potentially just been placed into based on where you are from.
Anything to add, Darren? Feel like it's
The only thing I might say, talking about summer programs, I might, advocate a little bit more for programs that actually are pre-college, are college programs that award the grant credit. That may provide you with more something that you can use in the future more than an experience at a college university. Those programs, we know that those are vetted by faculty and they are taught by credited college professors. They may be a little longer in duration. Those credits sometimes also will transfer in a different way, where you can maybe transfer more than just with test-based transfer credits. Most colleges have limits on the number of exam-based credits that you can transfer, but there's not as much. There is a limit as well on transferring from another institution, but that's a higher ceiling. And so you may be able to do yourself a service by participating in a program. Those usually are not eligible for those until after grade 11, maybe going in grade 11 to 12. But just a thought is, as you start to look at those, some of those are coming back online after not being available over the last few years, and so if those are out there, then those are things to look for.
fantastic. Well, we're going to move into extracurriculars and how to spend time and being a community member. Because I think often the question is not so much, what's the best way for me to be a community member? And the question is more like, which extracurricular activity will make me stand out in the application process? So let's speak to, what should juniors be doing with their time outside of just making sure that they get good grades?
What do you like? I think that's, I am going to say the same thing again, but really, there's not one answer for this, because there are hundreds of students who are listening, and there are hundreds of different pathways and perspectives, right? The sort of beauty of our job, and why you've heard us each talk about the privilege it is to read your application, the joy we get from learning about you, is because we open up an application and say, what is the student trying to tell me, right? And that's different for each student. So I would just encourage you to recognize that we want you to be happy. We want you to derive joy from what you're doing. And so spend time in ways that bring you joy. That is going to allow you not only to have a more delightful high school experience, but also allow you to be in an institution that will continue to support your growth and development. And I'll just say, there's only one time, this is true, Scouts honor, in application review, when I do any sort of math. I feel very grateful to work for a place that does not recalculate GPA. And it's if I think you've listed more than 168 hours on that community engagement chart. This is my 13th year, and every year there's at least one, and often more, students who list more than 168 hours per week. And honestly, I find that to be one of the most heartbreaking moments in application reading. Because what that's telling me is that a student thinks they need to do something that is literally impossible in order to be good enough. And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Your time is valuable. We think how you choose to spend your time tells us just a little bit more about what we value. And we hope you're taking time to take care of yourself, hang with your friends and family, and goodness gracious, sleep, right? You don't need to count each and every hour for us. We want you to have the freedom and flexibility to be enjoying yourself and doing things that you're passionate about.
All right, I'm going to try to stay on the do rather than don't, but I'm going to say, be a risk taker. What's the beaten path? What's the less beaten path? The beaten path is taking a college class over the summer at an Ivy Plus school, or at a school in the United States, or doing independent research. What's the less beaten path? Oh, wow, I could take a swim class and learn how to swim. I could go on a hiking expedition. I could go on this bike ride, in these other cities with this group this I found. I'm going to say one don't. Students, 17, 18-year-olds, seem to feel the need to start their own NGO or nonprofit organization, partner with existing entities. They know what they're doing. They're established. They have the trust in the community. Get involved in that way. If it's something you enjoy, as Kat said, or it brings you joy, spend your time doing things. If you spend your time doing things you enjoy, you will grow in ways that you are not expecting. You will not grow in ways that you're expecting if you take a class that you already have the knowledge for. If you're taking a class on acting or something that you don't have access to at home and it really, really interests you, that's one thing, right? But don't do it for the name of place. Do it because you really want to, and it's gonna you're gonna see that growth and bring you joy. And maybe you want to meet friends who have similar interests, and that's another reason you're taking it. But I would say look for the less beaten path, and be a little bit of a risk taker.
The one thing I want to add, just to echo exactly what Kat and Kehlani just said, what fun would our campuses be if every student had the same exact interests? We want a diversity of interests and passions and values on our campuses, so that there's a lot going on there. Our schools don't have 200 plus clubs and organizations just for the fun of it. They have it because students are interested in those kinds of things. So there's not one, I know that this is breaking news, but there's not one algorithm to get into college, and we're not looking for just one thing on everybody's application, because that would be boring. We want you to do things that you're passionate about. To sound like a broken record, do the things that you love, because those will translate better than the things that you don't love.
Okay, what about because I've heard the word passionate, and I know we all kind of cringe at that word a little. We say it, but we also are like, and there I've been hearing this little passion project thing thrown around a lot the last few years. And so there's a lot of people who feel like they do need to have some sort of passion project, because it is something that they spend a lot of time on and love and are showing that they love. So any thoughts about passion projects?
Well, I think that I am in a decade of my life that is not near your decade of life as a student. as far as I'll get into that of my age. And I'm still finding what I'm passionate about. And I think it's just like exploring the things that make your brain like spark a little bit, right? Like you go into a class and you hear a teacher talking and you're like, ooh, I'm not interested in this. And that's okay. And then you go into another class and you're like, this is so interesting to me. Pursue the things that make that little thing in your brain like spark a little bit, right? And those will be ever changing. And I think that's what I was trying to get at the last thing that I said too, is that not every applicant and student that passes through our hands has just one theme into their application. So while we try to come up with these holistic themes, the best students also are pursuing all of these different kinds of things and trying to find what makes them spark a little bit more. During the pandemic, I took guitar lessons because I wanted to see if that was something I was interested in. And then I became a cat mom because maybe I didn't actually hate cats as much as I thought. And news alert, I do love cats. And then I took a baking class virtually because these are all things that in this decade of my life, I thought might be interesting to me. So we're always, and I think that's what the liberal arts teaches you, to be a lifelong learner and to continue to pursue these different kinds of things that make your brain spark a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe it doesn't have to be a project in the sense that I won an award for this, I got a grant for this. It doesn't have to be rewarding in that way. Maybe it means, well, I've turned my attention, and the leisure reading I'm doing, you should all be doing leisure reading outside of the class, is about this topic because I'm really interested in it. And then I'm going to investigate it because I am really interested in it. And then that becomes, one passion, and maybe there's more, as Mari said, it doesn't have to be just one. And so then, all right, well, I've been introduced to something else. And then you may have a voice to tell us about that in an essay, or you have a voice to tell us that in your kind of what are a few things. It could be one thing, and that's great, but maybe it's three things that really make you that really get to the heart of what you love, and then share that with us.
Well, we only have a few more minutes left. This talk always goes by faster than I think it's going to go. And so if you have a question and you haven't asked it, please do, because we still have a couple minutes and I want to make sure that we're hearing from you. I wanted to use this last few minutes to talk about voice, because that is something that I think a lot of juniors are busy trying to get their application stuff ready. And spending a lot of time, but then not actually having found their voice. And me touching on this passion project and, Sparkle and whatnot is a little bit about finding your voice. I think a lot of students don't ask themselves any questions because they've just kind of been going through the motions of, I need to take this kind of class, I need this kind of test, I need to get this kind of grade, and then join this kind of club. But never really finding voice. So any tips on how to begin thinking about crafting the story? Because as you all said, when you open an application, you're looking for that story. You're looking for who are you as a whole person. Thoughts on how to develop your story and your voice in these few months?
Students, I have been waiting for this ever since I woke up this morning, because I thought of this when I woke up and I thought, this is brilliant. And you might not think it is, but I think it is. All right. If you could raise your virtual hand, I would ask you, who has watched a TED Talk? Yeah, everybody, right? I see TEDx, I see TED Talks all over your applications. Take the common application prompts and create a TED Talk. Create a TED Talk for each one of those. And instead of writing it down and brainstorming on paper, turn it into something that you talk about. Find your passion through talking about it. You might surprise yourself. Do it with a group of friends. Have your family do it as talent night, right? We're doing TED Talks tonight and everybody takes a topic, but really thinking about getting yourself up on stage and having fun with it. So really thinking about kind of flipping it a little bit. Instead of spending your time on paper, on the computer, researching how to write the best essay, talk it through first. This could benefit you in a lot of different ways. Talking about things you care about will come in handy when you become a student on our campuses. If you have an initial view, if you have an interview with the school. So really thinking about how do you talk through things rather than just writing them out. And that's where your authentic voice will come through. And watch yourself kind of being able to self-reflect when you start to get really excited about something. that may be your voice, or that might be part of your passion. So really thinking about that. So that was what I woke up this morning thinking about to share with all of you.
Yeah, I love that. That's what I'm always saying. Like, just talk to someone and then just talk, just start talking. And whatever you keep wanting to talk about is probably one of the things that you love. And I know it's challenging being a student with a lot of responsibilities. Like, there's just not a time of reflection. And so I think my advice is like, be intentional about pausing and taking some time for reflection. For some of you, that's journaling. Bullet journaling is super popular now. But for some of you, it is. I mean, y'all are recording videos to, video chats and reels and stories and things like that. I mean, maybe do a video journal for yourself of like, these are kind of top 5 things that happened today or whatnot, and find your voice. All right, let's see. There's a few questions from our other platforms. Okay, well, we already covered this. Somebody's still asking how important the SAT is in the application, and I think we touched on that. So, and then, okay, class rank. That's a question. How do you all see class rank? What does that mean for you?
I think it's really contextual. We only assess students within the context of where they're coming from, and not just within their country or within their state or their city or their province, but within their high school. And class rank means something different everywhere. And actually, so many schools are going away from even providing any form of class rank. So you sort of have to take it with a grain of salt, per se, in that it only means so much as to what it means within the school. A lot of schools just don't even provide it for us anymore. If it's there, we'll look at it because it's another part of the application that's been provided to us. But you have to also see, if you're ranked 2 and 16 students are sharing that with you, it sort of takes away some of the context of it as well. And to that point, it just doesn't matter as much. There's so many other factors that we consider.
Yeah, I think the question also is like, should I submit my own class rank? No, no need. Okay, great. Let's see. And this question is a little bit too deep for 2 minutes, but maybe we can like save it for another Tuesday talk. Yeah, let's save it for another Tuesday talk. Fantastic. Well, I want to share the screen one more time so that we can make sure that your contact information is out. I know that there were some school-specific questions here related to student life and things like that. And I just want to encourage you all, every one of these colleges that I invite to come on Tuesday Talks also has their own programming, lots of things available on their website, but they also have their own talks and Q&A sessions. So please, if you have a specific question for an institution, do reach out and find information. Remember what we said about connecting with a current student, how important that is. The wonderful thing about these institutions is that they do have students who care and who enjoy telling other students about their experiences. So make sure you take advantage of that. Fantastic. Well, okay. I'm going to share a fun fact that someone else, a participant is sharing. Did you know that sloths can hold their breath for approximately 40 minutes? Amazing.
I had no idea. That is truly shocking.
That is shocking. Thank you for that. Well, wonderful as always to share space with you all. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We will not have a Tuesday Talk next week, but we will have a Tuesday Talk in 2 weeks. And we are going to talk a little bit about rankings. So if there's a question about rankings, or you want more questions about like how to figure out where you sit, please do come to that talk. We'll get information out for you soon. Enjoy your evening, your morning, wherever you are. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.